Hi, everyone. Welcome to the All Things Amyloid podcast, where we feature patients, caregivers, and clinicians who discuss amyloidosis, a rare and incurable disease. Amyloidosis occurs when the body builds up abnormal amounts of misfolded amyloid protein, which can lead to serious and life threatening outcomes. I'm your host, Mackenzie, an amyloidosis patient and founder of Mackenzie's Mission. Our goal for this podcast is to raise awareness and share firsthand what it's like to live with this disease, to care for those affected by it, and to treat it. We hope this leads to earlier diagnosis and start of treatment, which will improve patient lives. In today's episode, we'll be talking about the diagnostic journey to uncover a family's disease. I'm happy to have with me today Erin Poyant, founder of HATTR NextGen and Senior Manager of Education and Awareness for the Amyloidosis Research Consortium, who's going to share her journey with hereditary amyloidosis. Welcome. We're delighted to have you today. Erin, I was struck by a quote you offered from Dr. John Berk at the BU Amyloidosis Center. Your father may have given you a disease, but he also gave you a roadmap. That's so incredibly powerful. So, your journey begins with your father. Let's start there. Tell us more.
Hi, Mackenzie. It's so nice to be here. And sure, imagine your family has an inheritable disease that has likely been passing from one generation to the next without setting off any kind of alarm bells. And ancestors may have left us with clues such as a sudden death from heart attacks, yet the full picture remained hidden until my father, Jesse Ely. His diagnosis, his journey, and passing led to a mission that I hope will change the future for amyloidosis within the Black community.
I can't even imagine. So, what can you tell us about your father?
My father was always a fairly healthy person as a former football star athlete. In his early 50s, he still trash talked while dunking on the 20 somethings during his occasional pickup game at the local Y. He still enjoyed going out for a jog, which for me, it was like a full on sprint to keep up with him, even in his 60s.
That's incredible. I love that. So, then what were the first recognizable symptoms that maybe clued you into thinking he might be ill?
As what happens with many at middle age, he did receive a carpal tunnel syndrome diagnosis following pain and numbness in both of his hands. He didn't think much of it, nor did his family or his doctors. By then, he had spent over 30 years in various leadership roles and was constantly using a computer. Then came the diagnosis of diabetes, which is common in the Black community. Dad was fairly quiet about his aches and pains, so any abnormal sensations, any fatigue would have been rationalized as stress or getting old, diabetes. That all changed in, I would say, late 2013, where seemingly out of nowhere, my dad had shortness of breath and the pneumonia. He just couldn't seem to shake despite receiving treatment. The unrelenting pneumonia and onset of heart palpitations landed him in a regional hospital where he was thought to have had a heart attack. He was stabilized and sent home only to return again, still very ill and now extremely bloated with a new diagnosis of congestive heart failure. At this point, as a family, we were pretty concerned that he wasn't getting better, and we recognized that he was seriously ill. A decision was made to now try another local hospital that was better known regionally for its cardiac expertise. I am thankful to Charlton Memorial and Dr. Kidway. After a cardiac catheterization, he informed the family, I think I know what may be wrong. It could be amyloidosis. And he felt if he was right, my father would need to go to Boston Medical Center. And unfortunately, he was right. And Dad began his care at BMC under Doctors John Berk and Frederick Ruberg. He spent the next several months taking every test imaginable, one of the most important being genetic testing. The result, hereditary amyloidosis, V122I mutation. We had no idea that our family had medical history containing genetics for what is known currently as a rare, potentially life-threatening, incurable disease.
And knowing what we know now about amyloidosis, it sounds as if his journey was actually quite typical of the average amyloidosis patient. These seemingly benign symptoms starting many years before a formal diagnosis, just continuing to escalate in intensity before things ultimately come to a screeching halt with tremendous illness. It's unfortunate that this is the point when patients are typically getting their formal diagnosis. And just as an aside, it is important to stress that just because there is a positive test for a genetic mutation, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that one will develop a disease, and one may be a carrier for their whole life and never develop symptoms. So that's just something that's important to note.
That's exactly right, Mackenzie. For more than 6 years, my dad fought a battle with advancing disease, stealing his physical ability, but not his humor, or as he used to say, his warrior's heart, until his passing in 2020. It was unfortunate that dad's diagnosis and progression to severe disease came before the time where newly approved therapeutics would have been of the most benefit to him. During his diagnostic workup in Boston, once this was determined to be a hereditary disease, my siblings and I were offered genetic testing. I declined getting testing at the time.
So that's interesting. Tell me more. Why did you decide to decline? Walk us through your thought process. What's going through your mind at a time like that?
Oh, probably several things. When dad relayed details about his illness, things were said like older individuals, more prominent in men. So I blocked it out as not being a problem for me to deal with in the present and maybe never. I also was working in Alzheimer's disease at the time and regularly seeing patients that were coping with the possibility of hereditary disease with no treatment available to them at the time. Because of that, I was resistant to the idea of obtaining this type of information for my own hereditary disease with what seemed at that time to be of no real benefit, as I was not symptomatic and there was no treatments or trials available for someone like me at the time. And finally, the truth, apart from all of it, was I just wasn't emotionally ready.
Yeah, I can understand that. It's such a huge decision with tremendous impact on your life moving forward. So then, what ultimately made you change your mind?
In 2022, when I began having back problems and randomly started having numbness in my right toe, I spoke immediately to my father's former amyloidosis team and was advised to consider genetic testing. The results confirmed that I too am also a carrier of V122I mutation. I've come to learn it's one of the more prevalent mutations of hereditary amyloidosis associated with cardiomyopathy.
Absolutely. We hear from various medical sources that it has a relatively high prevalence. According to the American Heart Association, the V122I variant is associated with the hereditary ATTR cardiomyopathy and is present in 3.4% of self identified Black individuals in the United States. However, it's not well understood exactly how likely it is for a carrier to go on to have active disease.
Yes. And for me, it does mean I would start the journey, which began with my dad. But as Dr. Berk explained to me, and it really resonated in a time of anxiety, was your father may have given you a genetic disease, but he also gave you a roadmap. I hope that this idea of a roadmap not only benefits me, but the entirety of the Black community. To me, having a roadmap is having sufficient information through opening up family dialogue and sharing information about when a hereditary disease was diagnosed in a family member and a general understanding of how that disease behaves, and also specifics as to how it symptomatically affected your family member over the years. Making a conscious effort to help yourself and your healthcare providers make informed decisions. And when I say decisions, it's to questions such as, should I be genetically tested? Are there symptoms possibly related to hereditary amyloidosis? Starting again, decisions to questions such as, should I be genetically tested? Are these symptoms possibly related to hereditary amyloidosis? Does it need the follow-up of a specialist? Should supportive care and or counseling be initiated for me as a genetic carrier or as a patient? Do I need an observation plan or a treatment plan? How do I help improve dialogue and preserve important family medical history? Utilizing this map could potentially improve an outcome for you and also heavily influence the next generation.
Erin, this has been quite a journey for you and your family. Thank you so much for sharing these very personal insights with all of us. I hope you have found the knowledge, support, resources, and the medical care needed for your family to travel this journey, to take advantage of the treatments that we have available to us, and improve your quality of life. Just one last question. When you look back, what is there anything that you would like to change in your father's journey if you could?
No, first, thanks for having me, Mackenzie. In many ways, my father was more fortunate than most with his journey in that he did not see numerous specialists prior to a diagnosis. But if I really had the power to change his journey, it would have been having sufficient knowledge of family medical history and overall awareness of amyloidosis to act at the earliest possibility of illness, where treatment would have had an even greater impact on prolonging his life. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to do that. So instead, I fight for my community to have the knowledge to make more informed decisions.
What an incredible outlook and attitude to have on a situation like this. So, key takeaways that I gather from our conversation today. First, being the outward appearance of health is not an adequate predictor of actual health based on genetic risk factors. Two, learning your family's medical history when possible is of the greatest importance to your own health. And lastly, knowing possible early signs and symptoms of hereditary amyloidosis allows one to be proactive, to start treatments when it becomes appropriate, and to potentially change the course of this disease's impact. So, again, thank you, Erin, for sharing your story about uncovering hereditary amyloidosis. It truly is a roadmap for others. And to all of our listeners, follow our channel to hear about future episodes in the series with Erin, where we'll discuss more topics such as educating family members, preparing future generations, and community challenges specific to the V122I genetic mutation. In the meantime, you can learn more about Erin and all of the great work she is doing at hashtag #HATTRNextGen. Thank you for listening to the All Things Amyloid podcast. If you find our podcast informative, please follow and share it with others. If you want to learn more about the work we're doing at Mackenzie's mission, please visit mm713.org. We'd also like to thank AstraZeneca Pharmaceuticals, Alexion Pharmaceuticals, Alnylam Pharmaceuticals, and Bridge Biopharma for their sponsorship to help raise awareness about amyloidosis. We hope you stay tuned for future episode drops. Thanks for listening.